to the Pledge of Allegiance. So if we can all stand, face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll start with the roll call. Commissioner Cantella.
Here.
Commissioner Brown.
Present.
Commissioner Fink.
Present.
Commissioner Wilson.
Here.
Commissioner Girding is absent this evening. And Commissioners, our City Council liaison, Kevin Zabel, is not here as well this evening. So, and we do have for Shannon Reidlinger here as the staff of the city from the Community Development Department. First item on the agenda here is approval of our meeting minutes from our January 10th, 2022 meeting. And I would ask if there are any changes needed in the meeting minutes. I guess I'll start. There is one that I have. It's regarding the section on the monthly editorial calendar. And in the last sentence of that paragraph on page 5, I think I was misquoted there, and I have a correction that it was actually not my home energy audit comparison, but my home energy bill from last year to present. And also there's a correction that I need to make here too, and that I recalculated the cost, and the cost was actually 60% higher. So I think change it from the audit to bill and 10 years ago to last year, and the 40% to 60%. Are there any other changes? Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to approve the meeting minutes with the change to the section on the monthly calendar.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor of approving the January 10th, 2022 meeting minutes with the one correction, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting minutes are approved. Thank you. So in our Environmental Management Commission review this evening, we have, we'll start with our old business, which is a review of the draft EV-ready zoning ordinance amendment language. And this has been put together by Shannon Reidlinger for us, and Shannon has also been reviewing this with the Planning Commission, and we now have a draft that we've all reviewed, and we'll be discussing this evening. So Shannon, I'll turn it over to you to lead that discussion.
Thank you very much, Chair. Okay, so the saga continues. We are now at a stage where we're pulling together actual draft language of what will be changed in our own city's ordinances to go in front of the Planning Commission. So to clarify, this has not gone to the Planning Commission yet. It will go ideally in the March meeting, but I wanted to give the EMC a chance to lay eyes on it first, because this is really coming from this commission before it goes to the Planning Commission. I'm sure the Planning Commission will have some thoughts on ways to further edit, so don't hold this too dear. Things will probably change down the line. But again, this is just a way to have something that's a little bit more cleaned from the last time that you all saw example language that was pulled from a variety of different ordinances, some of which were in Minnesota, some of which were actually from outside of the state. For this particular draft of the ordinances, I looked exclusively at the language of ordinances from other Minnesotan cities. So you see the list here. There were 11 of them. The degree to which those cities covered anything related to EVs in their ordinances varied quite a bit. So some of these cities had maybe a sentence or two about EV-ready language in their ordinances. Some, like St. Louis Park, have a lot. So right now, what I have drafted for Oakdale sits somewhere in the middle of that. It's not everything that could be out there. It's also not just a tiny little bit of language about EVs. So we're kind of right in the middle there. And the goal with this particular draft was to be sort of as high level as possible. Right now, where I think City Council is most comfortable is to make sure that the ordinances are presented as guidelines, as best practices, but not necessarily as requirements. So everything that we're outlining here is a recommendation for mostly developers or non-residential businesses that would like to incorporate EV charging into their parking in any way, shape, or form. So what we're trying to achieve, at least in this round with the ordinances, is an outline of those best practices. And we want to do that in a way that is as kind of high level as possible so as not to get too nitty-gritty with the details quite just yet. We don't have any language right now about EVs in our ordinances, so it's sort of a free-for-all for developers or businesses that want to include charging in their parking. This gives a little bit more structure around what that should ideally look like while still trying to be high level to allow for flexibility. And that really also gets at what the Planning Commission had pulled out from that example language. I think that a lot of these bullet points here that you'll notice at the top of the memo really speak to the Planning Commission's concern that if we have too much detail in this, that will actually detract from individuals wanting to install charging stations in parking lots. So I've tried as much as possible to address each of these bullet points at least shortly in the draft. So you'll see, for example, the second bullet point, the difference in residential charging options between single-family homes, townhomes, and apartments. There is one line in the new draft ordinance about specifications for charging in single-family homes, really just indicating where that charging outlet should be placed in a structure, but that's pretty much it because that's all I really saw in other cities' ordinances. There's a lot more detail when it comes to apartment and townhomes, that sort of a thing. We'll also notice here that for example, the difference between charging in parking lots versus parking structures, I didn't see a whole lot of language difference when it came to best practices in the two. There definitely wasn't anything to kind of go off of from other cities. So the way that particular bullet point has been addressed is really just to say, when you're adding a charging option, it needs to be either wall-mounted, in an island, or on a curb. That's how we're kind of trying to differentiate there. So with a parking lot, for example, you have a little bit more options. With a parking structure, it's probably going to be wall-mounted because it's a structure itself. So again, they're kind of tiny ways that we've added a little bit more structure to these bullet points here, but trying to keep it as high level as possible. The more detailed that we get, the more difficult it is to kind of deal with from an administrative perspective. So we want to give guidelines, not necessarily create more confusion. So with that said, I think most of what you will see in the draft language itself looks pretty similar to some of the examples that were presented to the EMC back in October. The only major difference being a couple different points that I wanted to point out. So we do have here at the very front of the memo, there is a couple different spots indicating that electric vehicle charging stations will be allowed as an accessory use. I just want to point out that you'll notice that it skips from the R1 district to the R6 district, and that's because everything allowed in the R1 district as an accessory use is also allowed in R2 through R5. So I figured if it was in R1, then it would sort of be grandfathered in for those other areas. But the rest of the districts here, we've tried to indicate that EV charging will be allowed as an accessory use. So that's one thing of note in case there was any confusion on that. And then the second thing that I will note here is that there is a table at the very end of the memo that sort of outlines best practices when it comes to having a variety of different charging options on a spectrum for commercial businesses and residential, multifamily residential businesses to consider when they're thinking about installing charging options for a parking lot, say. And this goes anywhere from having a space that is considered EV capable, meaning the raceways and the conduit have been laid, but they don't actually have EV charging stations installed, all the way to, again, EV installed. So that's a space that a EV owner can park in and charge their electric vehicle. These recommendations come from a report that was written for the U.S. Department of Energy. So it's a little bit more of a national as opposed to a local recommendation, and the table itself might be a little bit difficult to interpret, so there's probably going to be some tweaking that has to happen there if the table stays. Planning Commission gets to make that choice. But this is just something that's a little bit different from the example ordinances that were presented in October, because I found something new and thought might as well just add it in and see what the reaction is. So I'd love to hear if you have any feedback, if there's anything that you feel like is missing, if you feel like any of this is overkill and actually will not get to our goal, which is to spur the conversation around installing charging stations in Oakdale.
Well, I have a couple of questions to start. One is, these are recommendations, guidelines taken from best practices, and so you know, they're not enforceable in Oakdale. Is there something that could be said that you know, for people to use this as a resource and follow it, rather than it being, you know, up to people, you know, just being the Wild West out there with people just not paying attention to this because it's just guidelines, that in the future, you know, there may be, these may be codified into ordinance and required?
Yeah, it's entirely possible. The thing about the code ordinances is that it can be changed through this exact process. So just because we're indicating right now that the things that we're trying to get changed are guidelines themselves doesn't mean that they have to stay guidelines forever. I think that that would probably change once the market proves out that electric vehicles are here and that they're more popular than they are today. So there needs to be a little bit of a catch up in the market before I think that City Council may be a little bit more amenable to hearing about requirements. But for now, it's definitely staying a guideline.
Okay. And one other question is, I see nothing on the on fast charging stations. It's either the level 1 or 2 and the fast charging. I don't really see. I think they're mentioned as far as another type of charging, but there was nothing about installation of these that I can see in here.
Yeah, I will say most of the ordinances that I looked at from peer cities mostly referred to level 2 charging, since that tends to be what's more readily available right now. Fast charging, while ideal, is much more expensive, much more expensive at the moment. But that's a good point, that we do mention that fast charging is an option in the definition section of the edited ordinance, and so is that represented anywhere else in the ordinance, or should it be? A good question, and I will go back to that.
Yeah, I think that, well, we do, I think there are fast charging at the Hy-Vee, the
Yep.
Tesla stations have some fast charging there, so, you know, they may be, that could happen other places in the future, and to have a guideline that covers that as well, I think would be good. And I guess just a comment, I did like some of the specificity of the, the access to the charging, and that there was more detail on, how they should be located in that. But I understand that, I like these general guidelines. It's just that some of the specifics on, how they should be installed, minimum distances from various things, seemed to make sense to give some guidance there. Maybe when we move to this being a requirement, that would be something to add to this.
Yeah, and I think too, the question that I would have with that is I was having a hard time figuring out who determined those specifics and where they really came from. And so noticing that most of the ordinances of the cities that I looked at in Minnesota didn't really have any of that specificity, I opted to leave it out. It could be something where the Planning Commission comes back and actually says, no, we need to have that information. If we're going to have the rest of this, then it needs to be much more specific, in which case I'd have to figure out where some of that came from. Yeah. But until then, the default was to be a little bit more high level rather than detailed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we presently have a statute that requires the saving of those EV spaces for electric vehicles? Is that?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Nope. I think I need to look back on this. I think that my predecessor, Jen, had brought some sort of a conversation to City Council about whether or not there could be any code restrictions or code enforcement violations related to non-EVs parking in an EV spot, and that was not approved. So I think in the future, any language to that effect we'll have to wordsmith quite a bit. And then, since City Council has the final say on all of this, then they can yay or nay.
Sure. So that was a non-starter. Reserving EV spots for electric vehicles was a non-starter?
Well, I don't know that it was a non-starter, but at least in that particular conversation, when I looked back at the minutes,
okay,
that was indicated as a no for now.
All right.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's where it's not very pretty in the draft language at the moment, but there is a section that talks about, so we have section C that talks about EV signage, and in general says, these spots should be obvious that they are EV charging capable. I think maybe that's where we can kind of come at it from a different angle to say best practices indicate that there should be a sign here, and there should also maybe be paint on the actual asphalt to have an EV car, whatever. Or make it very, very clear that this is for EV charging, and then hope that individuals themselves will make the right choice about leaving those spaces open.
Sure.
Was there any language in here about whether or not people could privately own, kind of to what you were saying? I think that those Tesla fast charges are pay to play.
Or what?
Are you have to pay, right, in order to. So is it a guideline that this should be accessible for all?
There's not that kind of language in here currently, mostly because there's also not language about fees for using the charging stations themselves. There are some ordinances in other Minnesotan cities that do have specificity there, but that's because I think the government themselves put in charging stations and then had the rate that they are be used as part of their fee schedule. So without having clarity on the price to pay.
Yeah.
I try to stay a little bit more away from this concept of public versus private
Okay.
use, because it just gets a little gray there. Do you have any thoughts that I can maybe chew on? Again,
No.
since this is a draft.
I think I was thinking more kind of to what he was saying about keeping them like EV only, you know, to alleviate those who want to come in and kind of cause a kerfluffle. What keeps people from coming in and purchasing those spaces and then creating a commodity around it? And maybe that's just overthinking. But one would hope that EV capable would be as ready as a gas station is. Versus only specific people being able to use it, or I don't know, maybe I'm talking away from the point, because you have to pay for gas, but I don't know.
I suppose that comes down to like the manufacturers of the vehicles being on some sort of standard plug program.
Yeah.
and I don't think that's the case right now. I mean, that's just,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
And I'm wondering if some of this too is going to be a little bit of like trial and error.
Yeah.
Right. So we obviously have charging stations already installed at the Hy-Vee. It's not like Oakdale has 0 charging stations. They were put in without any sort of language in our ordinances.
Yeah.
So this is more just to be able to advertise that we're thinking about this as a city, that we want to ensure that it's not something that will cause confusion if other people are thinking about it. But this is going to take maybe a little bit of winnowing as the market changes.
Yeah.
And as we get, I don't know right now that any other company other than Hy-Vee is really thinking about this. So, you know, maybe putting this in the ordinances spurs conversation, and that conversation helps us come back and edit further.
Yeah.
has anyone gone out to look at the Hy-Vee charging stations and see if they meet the present guidelines?
It's on the paint, it's displayed, it's underneath lights.
Sure.
So, because I think there's two, there's one down by like the pharmacy, and then there's one over on
Right,
this side
On
by
the side of the building.
yeah, by the marketplace or whatever. So, I mean, from perusing, I would say yes, they
Sure.
do.
It would just be a real bummer if they didn't check all
Yeah.
the boxes when we put
The boxes that didn't exist.
Yeah, when they
Yeah.
put them in.
Yeah, they're located in an island.
Them an exemption.
And then could we tell like those Tesla stations no? You know, like if a private company was to come in and Tesla wanted to put in another row of charging, like these guidelines wouldn't allow us to say no if they wanted to do something.
Not currently, no, especially
Yeah.
because they're written as guidelines,
yeah.
recommendations, not requirements.
Okay.
And I think too, the conversation with Tesla, because it's what they do, they have a very different way of, potentially have a very different way of thinking about installing charging.
Absolutely.
Whereas like if you're say like you're a dental practice or a school in Oakdale, and you know that this is important, it's something that you care about personally, you want to install a charging station, you just don't know what it should look like. These guidelines are really more for that case, where it's not their primary business objective. They just want to do the right thing by putting charging options in a parking lot.
Yeah.
Well, getting back to Commissioner Cantola's question regarding the parking of non-EV vehicles in EV charging stations, seems that that is something that, do they have signage today that says EV only? Or what would prevent someone from putting up EV only signage on a charging station?
Yeah, I mean, whenever I go somewhere and I see a charging station, I stop and I stare at it because I'm just really curious to know what other people are doing. There are signs that indicate that this is for electric vehicle owners, for electric vehicle parking. So there's ways to grab something that's already been created. That would be kind of up to the installer of the EV charging capable space themselves. I do have in this draft language one little line that basically says any sign has to comply with Oakdale's sign ordinance because we already have that in effect. So as long as it's in compliance there, then it should be fine. But it's not like an active requirement in the current iteration of the draft language. I think there are spots to beef that up a little bit. Called out section C here. So there's ways for us to be a little bit more prescriptive with that if we want to, but again, I kind of defaulted at this particular iteration towards high level as opposed to too detailed or specific.
Yeah.
Well, on base level too, like you're saying, commission that would approve this is not looking to have it be enforceable.
Right.
Like, it's not finable, it's not you're towable, that's a word.
Right.
Well,
Like-
if it's a private parking lot, you could theoretically have the vehicle towed if you're the owner of the parking lot, right?
If it was posted,
If
I
it was
think so.
posted.
Yeah, I would, but that would be of their discretion.
Right, but it's not like someone's gonna come get a ticket for it.
Yeah, I don't think like OPD
Yeah.
would be able to enforce it.
No.
Yeah.
But to hope the tow truck shows up in time before they leave.
Or someone just doesn't do it. That would be
It'd be nice. I don't know that I'd
ideal.
rely on
I
that.
know, I know.
Open spots are open spots when you gotta get into the store.
Any other comments on the draft here?
I do like the chart. I think we should keep the chart.
Seconded.
Yes. I do think, thank you, Shannon. I think this is really a good draft, and I think, you know, are you looking for approval for any of this?
Yeah, might as well.
Okay.
It's better that we have it and then we say that the EMC voted on it consistently than not.
Okay. I'd look for a motion that the Environmental Management Commission approves the current draft dated February 2nd, 2022 for EV-ready zoning ordinance amendment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have our approval. So thank you for putting this together. I think this is, I know this has been a lot of work going through all of these different cities' ordinances and looking at the best practices as well as the recommendations from the US DOE, the Department of Energy, and others. So thank you for all your work on this. And let's see what the Planning Commission comes up with on it.
That's right.
Great. All right. We have an item on our new business this evening, and that is a discussion of the 2022 CERTs, that's the Clean Energy Resource Team's seed grant projects. And we've worked with CERTs over the years. Our commission has, and we do follow their programs. They've come in and provided information on energy efficiency for homeowners and other projects. And they have seed grants that they give to cities for city projects that align with the clean energy goals that CERTs has. So this program has, been a good resource for a lot of other cities around the Twin Cities and and even in outstate Minnesota as well. Some of these, as I looked at them, do align with our 2022 Commission work plan. And so, Shannon, I think I'll turn it over to you to talk about a few of those too, and I can maybe jump in at some point as well.
Yeah, and I'll definitely look to you to jump in as much as possible. But what I wanted to do, there were a lot of applicants that received some sort of a seed grant, and a lot of those were nonprofit organizations or others that weren't quite public. So I pulled out just the only examples that I pulled out were ones where a city had applied for a grant, just because in the future, if that's something that we're looking at, it would be nice to know what our peer cities have done. Although that doesn't mean that any of the nonprofit projects are not relevant or useful as well. But a lot of the ones that I noticed here were just about looking into barriers to energy efficiency or to renewable energy options. And I think in the future, that will be something that will be relevant to Oakdale. I think that right now, we don't necessarily know what is stopping our residents from taking advantage of some of these opportunities. I don't know that we have a comprehensive understanding of what is standing in the way of energy efficiency for individuals who are not interested, say, in solar or in EVs. They just want to make their home function a little bit better. So I think that when Chair Miller brought this to my attention, his main concern was to say, look at these different research projects that are going on to help understand what might spur on discussions around energy efficiency. So that's why I wanted to just at the very least bring this to the EMC to let you know that these types of reports and projects are going on in other cities, and that maybe in the future that's something that we can incorporate into our own work plan.
Great, yes. And I'd like to talk about a few specific ones that I think we could pursue that really very much in line with our work plan. First one is on energy efficiency. We've talked about that being a priority, and really the first step we should take before doing anything else in a project is look at energy efficiency possibilities, because that's where the real big savings are in energy efficiency. So both the cities of Bloomington and Maplewood intend to use grant funds from CERTs to study and promote ways for residents to reduce their energy use and lower their energy bills. And I think that if we could, get in touch with Bloomington and Maplewood, tell them we're interested in, knowing what the results of this grant and their study are, that perhaps we can apply that here in Oakdale and use that as a best practice to help address energy efficiency in Oakdale. I don't think necessarily we need to, since we have 2 cities already working on that, let's use what they're doing. And I have contacts both in Bloomington and Maplewood on their commissions that I can contact and further that along. And maybe at some point, we could invite them in to talk to us at one of our meetings. The second is solar. In the city of St. Louis Park, they're going to conduct a study about barriers to rooftop solar projects in naturally occurring affordable housing. So these are properties that normally do not have the funds or think about solar, and that they generally would not have the money to finance rooftop solar projects. And at least that being one of the barriers that I think they're going to be looking at, as well as other barriers to those properties. And we have a lot of those types of properties here in Oakdale. And it would be good to understand what they're going to be looking at in their project, and also if you know, again, we can use the outcomes from their study to address those barriers here in Oakdale. So again, I know a commissioner on the St. Louis Park. There, I think it's called a Sustainability Commission, but I'm happy to talk with him and find out more about this particular study and bring that back to our commission. And again, you know, we could have him or another St. Louis Park commissioner address our commission at some point. But I think those really jumped out at me as being directly applicable to our work plan this year. And so hopefully, I don't know what the timeline is for completion of these studies, but I can find out and we can take action on that as appropriate. Hopefully sometime this year that they'll be completing those. And there's also renewable energy and in the city of Warren and the city of Morris is looking to raise community awareness and engagement with clean energy technologies. Again, I think these would be good as we look at clean energy projects as well, understanding what they're doing. And perhaps another commissioner would be willing to contact those cities to find out about renewable energy projects at a future date. And then lastly is electric vehicles, and of course we're getting EV ready. And I think the main point about this, City of Houston will install electric vehicle charging station with grant funds. So there are grant funds for EV charging stations as well available through CERTs, and perhaps there'll be additional seed grants for EV charging stations in the future. So we should probably keep in touch with CERTs on that to see if they're going to be funding more charging stations with these seed grants. And I think I had read in one of their things that they will have another phase to their seed grants, especially and also funding of EV charging in the future. So I think keeping track of what CERTs is doing on EV charging would probably help us as well.
Do you think these grants on EV charging also stipulate that they'll give them some data, like how many people used it and how often was it used and that kind of thing, or they're just going to install it and that's the end of it?
Yeah, I don't know the stipulation there, and you know, I don't know. They didn't give details of the projects, and so I think that would be another thing. I mean, I'm willing to follow up on the first two items, energy efficiency and solar. If others would like to follow up on renewable energy and electric vehicles and find out more and see how it may apply to our work plan for this year.
Well, I can try to follow up on electric vehicles.
Great. Anyone interested in following up on renewable energy? Well, maybe we can, at some point, follow up with CERTs, and probably would be a good idea to, in one of our meetings this spring, to maybe invite someone from CERTs who has a good overall knowledge of their programs and how they may help us with our work plan. I know Diana McEwen does a lot of liaison work with cities, and would be one point of contact with CERTs to find out if she or she might recommend someone else to come in and talk about these programs.
would she be the person to contact to ask who the City of Houston contact is?
She could be a starting point, and I think they have people working in more detail on electric vehicles. And I say that because there's one other thing that was not included that'd probably be good to talk about at this point in new business, I think. And that I did talk with someone in CERTs who's working on solar for schools. And so it does align with our solar plans. And in the Solar for Schools program that they had outlined in their recent newsletter, it was a program that was approved by the Minnesota legislature to have the first phase be $8 million in funding for solar for schools. And the one thing about it was it's for schools outside of the Xcel Energy territory. And anyhow, the first phase just went through as far as the assessments and applications. And they had applications from 50 different school districts for 122 schools in Minnesota. And they requested $12 million in those applications with only $8 million available in this first phase. So quite a popular program. And in talking to CERTs today, I found out that there's going to be a program this summer called Solar Rewards for Schools that for people in the Xcel service territory. And so that would include Oakdale. And Xcel is in the process of getting approval from the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission. And they will have, after approval, $8 million available for that program. And there are things about the program that you need to put in your application. And I'm not sure about the application date, but this would be something to make the school district here, District 622 for Oakdale, aware of. And with the current projects that we talked about at our last meeting for schools, Eagle Point School, Skyview has just gone through some changes, including a new roof, which is one of the great aspects of having a new roof if you're going to locate it on a roof, the solar. And then, of course, the work at Tartan that our new community development director talked about at our last meeting. And so we have some good possibilities to take advantage of that program, and we do have some time to put together, well, the school district needs to put it together, the assessment, but we certainly can get them in contact with CERTs for help, and they offer help in looking at issues like their electricity consumption at the school and location of solar where it would be. And I think one of the things about this is also connecting it solar to curriculum. And that's a great aspect because then you get, like at Tartan, it could even be, looking at developing, people interested in getting into renewable energy field for future work and educating them about it. So, and in the other schools, just getting people interested in solar and getting these projects out there, showing it can be done. So, so I think this is something we can follow up with. I was hoping that could discuss this, see what our city council may be able to contribute to this. But we will need to get in touch with the school board and on this and make them aware of this program. They may already be aware of it. They may have someone tracking that, but I think it would be good to find out if they're aware of it and to have them get in touch with CERTs for some help and, and see if we can help move that along. I think it would be an excellent program, with the schools here in Oakdale alone. I think we have 3 good candidates. In discussing it with them, having a new roof is a big plus because generally there isn't land around the schools to do ground-mounted solar. So, any questions, comments on that? Well, I really got a lot out of this last CERTs newsletter and the follow-up talking with them. And so I think it would be good to follow up and have someone from CERTs come in and talk about these various programs and how they can help further our work plan for our commission. All right, the next item on our agenda is the monthly review of the 2022 EMC Editorial Calendar. And that was sent out. Any comments on that?
I have just one comment. So we were able to have a table at the January indoor market on the 22nd, and I continued to give away compost pails. I only had 12 to give away, and all of them are gone. I was in touch with Washington County to ask them whether or not they're going to continue to make starter kits available, knowing that their curbside pickup program is hopefully going to be rolled out at the end of the year, if not in early 2023. And they've indicated that they probably will still have a few kits available, maybe up until the summer when they'll probably start to phase them out. So we have an opportunity at the February 19th and March 19th indoor markets still to have a table to give out those kits. So if any of the commissioners are available and would like to help out with that, please let me know. Otherwise, just know that I will be there giving away compost pails.
Do we have any other information we can give away at the same time?
About?
Well, about batteries or World Water Day or any of these other things on the calendar?
It's possible, yeah. I mean, I think that the main goal of the table is really to talk about the composting program, but there's nothing that says that we can't just widen the scope of what we have on the table a little bit if there's some pre-populated material that can easily be put out there. So you mentioned the battery stuff. I know that Washington County has a bunch of flyers and other kind of promotional pieces to indicate what should happen with batteries. So that would be very easy to just set out on the table, for sure.
How do we get them?
Most of them are downloadable, especially if they're coming from Washington County. Yep, they make them available just as a PDF or a Word doc.
Is the city office here willing to print them?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yep, I can do that.
Yeah, I guess as a piggyback on that, maybe some ideas for February might be for the outdoor salt use. There could be some information on that, reducing salt use on sidewalks and that. And I think Commissioner Fink mentioned Edina may have some information available on their website about that. They've done work in that area. And for the March 19th, mentions here rain barrels and rain gardens. And maybe, I know we have a information on our website about rain gardens that was put together. And it was, I think, in a format that could be, that was a nice brochure when printed. There may be a PDF there that could be printed and to have it there and then to point to the website. Any other thoughts on the editorial calendar? All right. Are there any other commissioner updates at this point?
You guys want a tree board update?
Yes.
All right. So a couple things. I did talk with Lauren Coda, the city forester. At the end of last meeting, I had asked about the canopy preservation ordinances and stuff, and talked with him about the review of those. He is going to undertake that. He's been asked to, they've been talking about doing that, and it just kind of hasn't happened for whatever reason. But he's going to look into that. Essentially, his concern is, creating an undue burden for taxpayers, which is absolutely fair. But looking at how, the specific reason I brought it up last time was because there's a large project going in a natural area that's going to, probably cause some trees to be removed. And presently, there are ordinances that require replacement of those trees, and he's going to go through them, and we're going to look at them as kind of part of some tree board stuff. So I can report back with that when I've got more information on that. But then we also have begun finalizing plans for the tree giveaway coming up at the beginning of April, middle of April, the tree giveaway in April. And I think that by the time we have our next meeting, we will likely have rolled out the online sign-up. We're going to do it just like we did last year, where there's an online sign-up. The city will release information about that through the various social media and online channels. And then people just sign up for the tree that they want and the time slot that they want, and they'll come drive through. We'll check in. We'll give you a tree. There'll be a master gardener, most likely a master gardener or two hanging around to give you some information on planting that tree. And we've finalized the species. Obviously, these are our selections, and they will likely not change, but there is a chance that the nursery, something may go wrong. But this is going to be the stuff that we're offering is Blue Beach. We're going to give away a serviceberry cultivar. We're going to give away a common hackberry, and then there's a small, a medium-sized juniper, small to medium-sized juniper conifer that we're going to give away this year. So some cool trees that we're going to be giving away. And then if anybody wants more information on that, the city will be releasing more as we have it through various social media channels. So,
Awesome.
does anybody have questions about that? I'm very excited for the tree giveaway. I love doing that. It's super fun.
Great, thank you for the update on that.
And useful.
Any other updates? Well, hearing none, and we don't have our council liaison for an update. So I would look for a motion to adjourn our meeting.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor of adjourning our February 7th meeting of the Oakdale Environmental Management Commission, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.